What is going on, YouTube? Andrew Miller, Shane Black from Hook'emHeadlines.com, the Hook'em Horn Show. Come back for y'all today. I had a week off. I was feeling a little under the weather last week, but back today, previewing the Vanderbilt game this upcoming weekend. We'll talk a little bit about the Georgia game since we didn't really get any thoughts out last weekend. Again, since I was under the weather, we were off the air. But this game is much bigger, much more important than I think anyone really thought it was going to be. When you're looking back at like the preseason coming into the season, Vanderbilt 4-0 at home for the first time since like 1982, I believe. I saw somewhere that mentioned that this game could have possibly been the site of College Gameday if Texas had beaten Georgia, which looking at College Gameday going to Indiana, I would probably agree with that, especially like covering the Diego Pavia story and everything. Texas probably still would have been number one, so that would have been the second number one ranked team heading into Vanderbilt in like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. Nonetheless, extremely important game. Texas favored by a pretty healthy margin. Kind of surprised, honestly, that it's not 2 scores, that it's still 3, but the line has dropped a little bit in Vanderbilt's favor. I think it's about 18.5, 19 points. And when I checked a few hours ago. That said, I still feel pretty confident about this game. I'm mainly looking for how Quinn Ewers is able to respond and how we're able to play in the trenches. Because, Georgia kind of beat us up really good last week, and it was a humbling loss. And, Texas, that's why they lost the game, was Quinn Ewers just got happy feet back there in the pocket, didn't look comfortable all game. And, Georgia capitalized on turnovers and was better in the trenches than we were. Their linebackers and edge rushers were just monsters last week. So, Shane, I'll pass it over to you. What are some of your thoughts coming off the loss to Georgia and then, heading into Vanderbilt this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's unfortunate. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. I think, though, especially in the 12-team era where one loss doesn't kill you, Texas can take a lot away from the game. And I think Sark can use it as like to his team, pointing to, we kind of just got manhandled in this one. And everything that you came into the season, preseason goals of winning the SEC and winning a national championship, still very much on the table. I think in the past, we potentially see, maybe not last year, but the year before that, where Texas, and in 2021, where Texas lost 5 in a row, you could see there'd be a little hangover and I think that Texas might not bounce back well, but this team, I think, is a little different. All accounts, practice this week, everyone really focused and kind of itching to get back on the field. I think that's a good sign. But, in general, I think coming out of the Georgia game, I'm still as confident as ever in the defense. We talked about this offline, but besides the 89-yard drive in late third, early fourth quarter, the Texas defense was stifling. I mean, if you look at the box score, like Carson Beck, 175 yards, 3 interceptions, no touchdowns. You look at that, you think you're going to win that game 10 times out of 10. The offense didn't do anything to really help the defense at all. But I'm still confident that this defense is championship caliber. And I don't know about you, Andrew, but I would almost prefer that the offense be the one to struggle because, with Steve Sarkisian as your head coach, one of the best play callers in the country, we can question his decision making, especially with what happened with the quarterbacks last weekend. But I'd prefer the defense to be ahead of the offense because I have confidence that Sark and this offense can turn it around. Whereas if the defense was struggling, maybe not so much. But I think we learned that this defense is always going to keep you in ball games, and that the offense is struggling to run the football, which in a Sark offense is kind of surprising. I don't know the exact stat, but he pretty much has always had an 1,000-yard rusher as a head coach or offensive coordinator. So for Texas not to be able to run the football, Jaden Blue with 0 carries last week, I think was a little surprising. And I think we'll see a change this week. But I think this team's excited to move on. I'm excited for them to move on. And like I said, everything's still ahead of you. So season not lost by any means. And I think one thing for Texas fans to take into account, I mean, you're still number 5 in the country. And this is a program, before 2023 that had some really, really lean years for, 12, 13 years. So to kind of give up on this team just because what we saw on Saturday seems silly. This isn't a fan base that has had the Alabama or Georgia level success recently. So I don't think there's any reason to jump ship after one loss. I think most Texas fans do realize that.
This weekend's game, I think, kind of serves as a litmus test for Texas of, like you're saying, not only how you can respond, but I mean, how you can hold up through injuries. We've gotten a couple of injury report updates this week. For the SEC mandated injury reports, Isaiah Bond has been downgraded to doubtful. Andrew Makuba has been listed as doubtful both days, so it looks like Texas will be without both those guys. I don't know if I'd mentioned that on camera off air already, but Quintravian Wisner already removed from the injury report, so definitely good news there. Safety, running back injuries have both been really devastating, I think, for the Longhorns this season, especially now where you're down 2 starters at the safety position. I think the good news there, I'll get into that a little bit later, but I guess I'll cover the bad news first there. Missing Williams and Makuba, you got a few options, I think, at this point of, you play Jordan Johnson or Bell, true freshman, more snaps, maybe Xavier Filsaime. Obviously, they're going to be relying very heavily on Michael Taff and Jelani McDonald. McDonald's been playing pretty well this year, but he's been thrust into a much bigger role. And then you might be looking at a situation where Jahdae Barron's moving back to safety this week. We'll see about that, but they might need him over there a little bit more because I think the corner depth is a lot more solid right now than you have at safety, because you still have Gavin Holmes that you can give those starting reps to. And against Vanderbilt, their big tight end, Stowers, not Stowers, correct?
I was wondering that, actually, and it's a name that we've read so often because of his pretty high level quarterback commit back in the day. But
he was. Wasn't he from Denton?
Yes, I think so, because he was. I don't know if he was on A&M's roster or committed there at one point, but.
Yeah, he was on their roster.
Okay.
I think it's Stowers, but anyway, yeah, it's covering him's going to be a tall task, regardless if it's Anthony Hill, Mo Blackwell, Michael Taff. He's long, he's fast, he's a very good route runner, got good hands, large catch radius. He's a handful to deal with. They can line them up in a multitude of different ways, and they do, and attack you. Leading tight end or leading receiver among tight ends in the SEC this season, I believe a little over 400 receiving yards, handful of touchdowns. So dealing with him is going to be a problem, I think, at times, because there's just so many different phases of this Vanderbilt offense you have to worry about. Again, I guess we'll get into that here in a little bit in terms of like the X's and O's of this game. But the point being that, these injuries that stand, or, oh my God, Vanderbilt. But, some of these injuries for Texas, it's really going to test your depth. And some of the, Texas really values that ability to cross train a lot of these defensive backs. And if they do play someone like a Jahdae Barron more at safety this week to give you, at least solid depth there. And like I said, I think the corners will hold up just fine against Vandy's receivers. Texas should be all right. I feel better about the secondary still than I do about the linebackers and the defensive line because of just all the different phases you have to defend for Vanderbilt. On the offensive side of the ball, it's good that we're going to have that Wisner is pretty healthy for this game. I know he was in the green non-contact jersey earlier this week in practice. And so he's still dealing with a lingering shoulder issue. But you have Jaden Blue healthy. I've heard that Jared Gibson's healthier. He's been dealing with foot injury since I think week 1 against Colorado State. He's been pretty banged up this year. And so I could see them giving more carries to Gibson this week because you're playing in a pretty undersized Vanderbilt defensive front. Can mention this off air, but Vanderbilt's the only SEC defense that's given up at least 4 yards carry this season. So I think there's an opportunity there to get the ground game going. You mentioned it earlier where, Texas hasn't had a 1,000-yard rusher every year under Sark. He's always had that. I think Wisner is probably still the guy that you would look at if Texas does, make a decent playoff run, maybe make the SEC championship game. That gives him some additional cushion to, maybe have a really explosive second half of the season. That said, I think Texas is still mostly running back by committee right now. I think it's interesting when you look at the distribution of targets right now. You're missing Isaiah Bond probably this weekend. Your leading receiver. He's still dealing with a lingering ankle issue. He was questionable on the first injury report yesterday. We're recording this on Thursday night, so that would have been Wednesday's injury report, where it looked like Isaiah Bond might be able to go. Because he was limited in the second half of last week's game, which I think kind of hurt Texas because he's just such a mismatch, I think, against Georgia's secondary one-on-one. But I did an article on it just before we started recording. Ryan Wingo looks like he'll be getting his first career start this weekend. I think there's also going to be ample opportunity for Silas Bolden, DeAndre Moore, Matthew Golden. A lot of these guys that have been productive this season, but, have kind of been secondary targets at times to, mainly Gunnar Helm and Isaiah Bond, who are Texas's two leading receivers. I'm looking for a big game out of Wingo. This Vanderbilt secondary is decent. They got, especially some of these hybrid safeties and CJ Taylor, they got some dudes back there, but the corners, that I think they're just about average, and Texas's receivers much faster, more athletic, and so I think that there can be some mismatches there. But one of the things with some of the injuries on offense, Texas really relied on the running backs to get involved in the receiving game. The two leaders in targets last weekend for Texas were Jaden Blue and Quintravian Wisner. I don't know if you're going to see as much of that this weekend, just because Texas, I think, is going to be able to set the tone more with that intermediate passing game, short passing game, getting out in space, with a Vanderbilt defensive front that's not as active or getting as much pressure on you as Georgia's did. So you're going to be able to spread out the field a little bit more, I think. Anyway, that's kind of been my spiel on. I just think that the injuries are really going to impact things this week, even though it's not like if you look at Texas's injury report, doesn't have that many guys listed, but the guys that are doubtful or out, that'll be a heavy impact on both sides of the ball, I think, for this weekend. But
yeah, and I think with the bye coming up next week as well, I mean, this team is definitely not taking Vanderbilt lightly. They have 25 next to their name. They're 5-2. One of the best starts in recent memory. They beat Alabama, but I mean, this is still a team that they lost to Georgia State earlier this year. The talent discrepancy between the two teams is wide. So I think this is one of those things where if it was a national championship, SEC championship, Isaiah Bond might be a go, even just to have him on the field to attract the defense's eyes. But for this one, I think Sark is confident in what he has in the receiver room and in the safety room with Jelani McDonald, like you mentioned, who we are high on him when Texas was able to sign him. I believe he was Oklahoma State for the longest time. And for him to progress this quickly as a true sophomore, it has been great. So I think that it's strategic in a sense where I do believe Makuba is probably not a go regardless of the game, but for Bond, I think Sark can see you get him to the bye week, get him another week healthy, and then you attack that you attack the stretch. And I think with the 12-team playoff, we have to remember. Even after the bye week, you have 4 regular season games left, hopefully an SEC championship. And then if you make the national championship, another 3 to 4 games. So, Texas potentially has 9 more games on the schedule this year, which is crazy to think about. But, Sark is playing the long game. And I think he's doing it pretty well.
Yeah. I mean, Texas is going to get another bye week at a good time because, guys like Makuba and Bond, by my understanding, will be able to rest up and be healthy for that Florida game on November 9th. And then you got an important stretch of rivalry games there, and then Kentucky, sandwiched between Arkansas at home and then A&M on the road. And so Arkansas is a home game, right? I believe so.
Arkansas's road. Well.
That's right. Yeah. So, I mean, that's going to be a tough one too, obviously.
Yeah.
What they were able to do against Tennessee here a few weeks ago, shutting them down. But yeah, I think that, I think this weekend's game for Texas, for one, potentially could be your second toughest game. I mean, you only got 3 road games left. So yeah, probably your second toughest game, second toughest road game. We'll see about Arkansas, but also, I just think that like this is a game where Texas's offense, if they're not coming out, they're not on schedule, and they're looking kind of like they did, just super sluggish in the first quarter, like they have in multiple games this season. I mean, OU, they didn't get a first down in the first quarter, only had 3 first downs against Georgia. That OU first quarter, that was the first time in the Sark era that they hadn't gotten a first down in the first quarter. So, something's got to give there because Vanderbilt's so good at controlling the clock, winning that possession battle that, if you really get yourself behind early, your guys can get tired on defense. It's not going to be hot, but it's going to be warm on Saturday. It looks like about like low to mid 70s. And, Vanderbilt's ability to again control the clock, run the ball, and they're still a good passing offense. They're still averaging about 40 more pass yards per game than rushing, so they can hit you both ways. I think, yeah, I think the offense is a concern for me a little bit, and that kind of leads me into what I wanted to talk about a little bit with like just at a high level some of the X's and O's key guys here that I think really need to step up for Texas. And Ewers is just, it's so important for this game for the Longhorns because you figure what the last 2 weeks maybe played 2 good quarters. That might be a little harsh, but like Ewers, he's been inconsistent. It clearly looks like he's hesitant after the injury and taking a little bit longer to get back from that than we saw the previous 2 years. That said, I think that this is a game where he can get a little bit more comfortable. Again, Vanderbilt isn't a team that has been all that effective this season rushing the passer. And I think for all the heat that Texas took last week for allowing 7 sacks against Georgia, I thought the offensive line actually played pretty well. Cam Williams had his struggles for sure. But Kelvin Banks, yeah, I think he had the longest active streak in the Power 5, Power 4, whatever, for any offensive tackle without allowing a sack. Then that was snapped. But he was facing a pretty rabid Georgia defensive line and line, twisting, stunting, all those linebacker delayed blitzes last weekend. They were really getting after Ewers, and I thought that Ewers actually probably took more of the share of responsibility for some of those sacks than the offensive line. This weekend, I've got more confidence that this offensive line will bounce back. Sounds like the intensity, in team drill, especially in the trenches, has been really, really good, competitive kind of effort in practice this week, which you would expect to hear. But, it being so amplified, I think says a lot about how Texas is going to be able to respond and come out this weekend and really get a good bounce back win. Conversely, I think the defense is going to have a pretty good week, but be prepared for Vanderbilt to have I think maybe have some success in the first and third quarters of this game. They're really good at making adjustments and being able to find different ways to attack some really good defenses. Their option offense, they have the perfect quarterback to be able to run that. It's kind of funny. Their offensive coordinator is Tim Beck, but other Tim Beck, not the one that was at Texas. But between Stowers, Pavia, and Beck, they brought over this kind of offensive scheme from New Mexico State last year, and it's obviously worked very, very well for Vanderbilt. They're 2-1 in SEC play, 3-1 against P4 opponents this season. Pavia, he's been just clinical with this offense. I was looking at it today, only SEC quarterback with double-digit passing touchdowns and no more than 1 interception. He's also only got, I believe it's 1 or 2 turnover-worthy plays this season, so he's also best in the SEC in that stat category. It's going to be a handful. Texas has been really good in the turnover margin this season, but Vanderbilt's been really good too, just because of how good their offense has been at kind of, helping out the defense and keeping them off the field a good bit and controlling the clock and not putting them in disadvantage sort of situations where, if you turn the ball over and give your defense give opposing offenses a short field, they haven't done that. It's going to be a lot this week on the Texas linebackers and edge rushers. You're going to have to play really good contain. You have to hold your gaps. You have to win your one-on-one matchups. and not overcommit. So I'll pass it over to you. What do you kind of think about the, kind of the different matchups for Texas offense, Vanderbilt's defense, and then vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, so you hit the nail on the head when talking about time of possession. I think the Alabama upset is something that, since it happened, I'm sure Sark and the staff have been, breaking down meticulously for this game. And you look at it, Alabama didn't even have the ball for 18 minutes, which is it's a recipe for disaster. I think Alabama ran 45 offensive plays, and it seemed like at the end, if you were watching it, Vanderbilt would score, and then Alabama would hit a deep touchdown to Ryan Williams, and then Vanderbilt would get the ball back and take 8 minutes and score again. So I think it's one of those things. I noted this in an article earlier this week. Texas is going to have to be really good on the money downs, on third down, because Vanderbilt offensively is very good on third down. I believe they are fifth in the country, converting 51% of their third downs. And a lot of that is because these third downs are very manageable. Like Tim Beck does a good job. He's worked with Pavia for a couple of years now of staying ahead of the chains and getting into those 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4. So then the defense really doesn't know what's coming at them. A lot of that option game, a lot of quarterback run, and then they do take their shots over the top. I do think missing the safeties this week, and Williams obviously out for the year, and Makuba, it could be a little bit of an issue with eyes caught in the backfield, because while Vanderbilt doesn't throw the ball that much, only 38% of the time, which is one of the lowest in the country, Pavia is 4th in the conference at 9 yards per attempt. And, that tells me is when he does throw, he's looking over the top and looking to push the ball downfield. So I think play action and being sound with your assignment is going to be crucial this weekend. I think bringing the physicality too against the team that wants to establish the run. They want to control the clock with the run. Forcing them back early and often will be important, because if you get Vanderbilt into clear passing downs, you have the massive advantage. And I think at that point, if you get this game script correct and you take a 10, 14 point lead early, the defense is flying around, forcing Vanderbilt into long third downs. I think that's where you could get some turnovers out of Pavia. You mentioned only 1 interception this season and only a couple turnover worthy plays. That's because of the script that the offense has followed, and they've done it really, really well. And, so Pavia does a good job eating the ball and not forcing it into harm's way. But if he's down early, feeling the pressure, number 5 Texas, and people really watching this game because of what they did against Alabama, I think you could see Pavia start trying to force some throws, and that's where you get the opportunistic plays from the Barons, the Gilbos, the Manny Muhammad's on the outside. So I think this game is all about game script, especially on the defensive side of the ball, not letting Vanderbilt have those 10-minute scoring drives, because worst case scenario, you could look up midway through the third quarter and, it's a 17-17 game, and Texas is, scored on 3 out of their 4 offensive possessions, but they've only possessed the ball 4 times because Vanderbilt has held the ball for 75% of the game. So that's something you want to avoid. Luckily, the Texas defense has been not as good as they were last year on third down, but still very good at getting off the field. So that is really going to be an indicator to me on how this game goes if you look at the third down conversions for the Vanderbilt offense when it goes final.
Yeah, I mean, and to go back to what we were talking about with that, turnover margin, that I think that will play a critical role here too, where, if Texas turns the ball over 2-3 times this weekend, that you're putting yourself with an uphill battle that might not be able to be overcome on the, well, we'll see if Texas plays really well. They've been in some of those tight games before, but you don't want to put yourself in a situation like you were last weekend against Georgia, where, even though Texas got 3 turnovers against Georgia, Carson Beck really had a pretty bad game. Trevor Etienne just kind of carried it for him on offense, literally. I mean, 3 rushing touchdowns. He was just a bowling ball back there. But, Vanderbilt's offense, yeah, I mean, I think you hit a lot of the important points there where, they don't throw the ball a lot, but when they do, they can get some decent chunks. Like, it's Diego Pavia is not the best deep ball thrower in the SEC by any means, but he's smart, and they're smart about the way they call those plays. They got a few different types of receivers that can be pretty explosive. Junior Sherrill doesn't get targeted a ton, but when he does, they often result in explosive plays. I believe like some 35% of his catches this year have gone for explosives. Vanderbilt has the highest boom percentage of any passing offense in the SEC, which kind of again goes to show how much they rely on some of those explosive plays when they have to. They're also really smart about not, like you said, not putting themselves behind the sticks and having to, rely on, a big pass on 3rd and 12 or something like that where the defense knows what's coming. Not only does Vanderbilt have the highest boom percentage of any passing offense in the SEC, but they also have the lowest bust rate. So they're very smart, very efficient, very methodical with the way they move the ball. It's not the sexiest offense you're ever going to watch, but it's very clinical. And it's very complicated to break down when you're watching it because the way they use different splits and angles in the zone game and get different pulling blockers and everything out there, it is impressive the way that they draw up a lot of their plays for situational football and really just different complex layering with the option game.
Sorry to jump in, but I think that is what could be the frustrating part as an opposing fan, because it doesn't look sexy like you were saying. Mm-hmm. And you're like, how is the defense not stopping this, And it's just first down after first down after first down. So it can be frustrating. And when it's frustrating for the fans, sure as hell is frustrating for the players on the field.
Yeah. I mean, they just have the perfect quarterback to be able to operate this offense, a guy that's smart, fast, pretty shifty, but, doesn't really have any glaring weaknesses that you can attack, and they have just enough around him on offense, I think, to make this whole thing work. Because their running backs haven't been like super productive this season. They haven't really been given a chance. That's probably not a fair way to characterize that. It's been more of just the Diego Pavia show on the ground, and the rest is really reliant on Stowers. I mean, he is by far their biggest weapon in the receiving game. Not to say like Cedric Alexander, I think, is also an important weapon to watch for Vanderbilt. Just because you mentioned it earlier, I wouldn't be surprised if they try to take some deep shots in this game. Maybe try to drop some play action if they're able to run the ball early. I'm interested to see. I know that this has been kind of pontificated upon a little bit this season for the Longhorns more than usual because of just momentum swings can be so important in the SEC and dictating the results of games. But I think that the coin toss could be interesting. If Texas wins it, I probably think that would be smart to go on offense first to be able to set the tone. We've heard Quinn's had a good week of practice, but I think you really have to put this game on him and the ability to command, the line of scrimmage, move bodies off the football, and really set the tone physically. Because if you don't, Texas has another one of those. Like I said, if you have another first quarter where you're no more than a few first downs, you're going to put yourself in a tough spot in what's been a really tough place to win for ranked opponents this season.
Yeah, I think if we're switching over to the offense here, I agree with you. I think I
didn't mean to switch that up on you that much. I guess just complimentary football. Vanderbilt does it so well.
Yes, I agree. So talking about the Texas offense, I think the frustrating part about the Georgia game was nothing was working. You couldn't run the ball. Sark kind of abandoned the run game early. We saw early in the third quarter, he went back to it and then kind of abandoned it again late when you're down 2 possessions in the fourth. And obviously Quinn had the game that he did. So nothing was really working. And so on that front, I want to see Texas be able to run the ball and be deliberate in doing that on Saturday. But you also want Quinn to get his confidence back and come out and get some early completions and push the ball downfield. So I think what would dictate what would be a successful game is, you run the ball, you have more rushing attempts than passing attempts, but Quinn is really efficient in his attempts. If it's a 20 for 25, I don't really think this is a game where you want him to throw the ball 40 times, but not turning the ball over, taking those deep shots and being efficient. A lot of what was discussed after the Georgia game. People talking about Quinn's yards per attempt going down each season, his yards per attempt compared to Arch. You mentioned, he targeted the two running backs a lot on Saturday, and that was because of the pressure that Georgia was getting. That's not how you run a successful offense. Is not targeting your running backs that consistently. So I think for Texas, it's going to be all about balance, and I'm excited because I do think they have a chance to kind of right the wrongs. This Vanderbilt defense can be had. They're pretty strong up the middle with at the linebacker position with Langston Patterson, and then two safeties are some of their better defenders. But on the outside, they could be had. So I think that's where you run those outside zones with Jaden Blue. You get the ball in your playmaker's hands. You take the shots deep. I think that there is a way for Texas to accumulate points pretty quickly on Saturday. And you make a great point that if it doesn't look good early, things could start to snowball quickly. And Nashville is not one of those places where the crowd's really going to get into it and you're going to be affected all that much, but more on the internal psyche of the team. If you come out and you struggle on offense yet again, I think this team's solid enough and they have strong enough leaders to where they never really turn on each other. But at some point in time, you're a Jade Barron, you're an Alfred Collins, a Vernon Broughton, a Barron Sorrell. You got to be like, hey, we're doing our job. Jade Barron, I came back to win a national championship, and he's one of Quinn's biggest supporters. Rocking his shirt off the bus. But I mean, the offense has to step up. So this is a huge game, not only to win and look good doing it, but to gain confidence ahead of the bye for the final stretch in the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the most important. This has emerged to be one of the most important games of the regular season. I think that is probably a fair characterization. It's also emerged as probably one of the scarier games if you're a Texas fan. I mean,
That's a good question. I'm not sure. It sounds like there's a major discrepancy one way, and I can't pinpoint it because I feel like the game script's been different in a lot of these games. So
I guess I was trying to trick you a little bit here. So here's the thing with it is that they're actually averaging about 30 more passing yards in the first half versus the second half, but their success rate is 10% lower in the first half than the second half.
Okay.
So Texas has not been, they're now, mind you, too, if I switch that to power, like power conference opponents, I'm pretty sure that would drop significantly.
Fair, yeah.
But also, if you look at it for me, it seems to be that Sark has things scripted up to, move the chain, set the tone.
Yeah.
He doesn't really have anything to answer for when Texas gets in those difficult situations when they face, that first miscue, let's say the opponent 40-yard line. How many times have we seen that where Texas, gets a false start, gets set back, maybe goes for it on fourth down and then fumbles it 2 plays later. It's become a really frustrating sequence, I would imagine, for Sark. But also, this is on the coaches to be able to have your team prepared. I mean, especially for Sark, as good of a play caller as he is, it has been frustrating to watch, the offense just sputter out sometimes once they cross that 30. Now it feels like, the goal, getting it in the red zone and scoring is not really the issue. It's once you cross midfield.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a good point.
I don't have the numbers. I would have to dig a little deeper to run that. But it goes without saying that, yeah. And you could also look at first half versus second half rush yards. That is just from a yardage perspective is more telling. Just of basic production. Texas is averaging about 74 first half rushing yards since the start of last season and about 104 second half. And the success rate is still about that 10% difference, which I think, again, you talk to Sark, that still kind of pieces together that story where, Texas in the second half, sometimes they're able to make adjustments or just find a better rhythm. It seems like the miscues are less so in the second half in a lot of these games.
To kind of go back to your point about sputtering out over midfield, you look at the second half last week against Georgia. All 6 drives, Texas got the ball past midfield, and they only ended up with 15 points. So, I mean, obviously, some if it's a different point in the game, you maybe take the field goal instead of going for it on 4th and 17 or whatever it was at the end of the game. But yeah, no, that's a great point. I think it's interesting and definitely something to look at.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I can run those numbers at some point, but I'll probably save it until after the Vanderbilt game to see if, Texas is really able to pull it together heading into the bye week. Sark has been really good at making adjustments as the season goes along. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we do start to see, especially if Texas is able to run the ball better against Vanderbilt and in these next few games. If I'm looking at it, like Kentucky's been pretty good defending the run, depending on who they're playing. This season, A&M's run defense is good, but like against teams like Arkansas, depending on the personnel like Florida and like Vanderbilt, I think Texas these next few games should be able to run the ball pretty well. And so, again, providing that health holds up at running back, that they're able to seal the edge okay. There's one thing I did want to ask before we get into score predictions here, because I ask this from time to time, but I do feel like it's very important for this game, and I've obviously alluded to that a lot with like the different injuries and matchup talk and just different adjustments for Texas. I'm curious to hear your kind of key players who can really, like, who needs to step up if Texas is going to win this game on Saturday.
Yeah, so my mind first goes to the edge play, just because the pressure that the Vanderbilt offense constantly puts on those guys, often leaving them unblocked because of their option run game. So a Barron Sorrell, a Colin Simmons, especially, you would think Sorrell, being the veteran that he is gap sound and is able to make the right decisions. But a guy like Colin Simmons, who, probably unarguably your best pass rusher, can he be, gap sound and not always, chase after the ball? That'll be interesting to watch, because I think you can kind of snuff out the Vanderbilt offense and, for lack of a better term, cut the head off the snake if you're able to be sound against the option game. That Texas has that team speed on the edge. So, tackling and being where you're supposed to be, I think will be important. I think on the offensive side of the ball, I'm looking to the backfield, because, you made the point that the offensive line, for as much heat as they took, giving up 7 sacks, a lot of that was kind of on Ewers holding the ball. A lot of guys running open that Ewers just didn't see because of the early pressure. It seemed like it phased him throughout the whole game. I think it can also be attributed to the fact that Texas couldn't run the ball. So Georgia was kind of just pinning their ears back and getting after the quarterback. And, you can blame the backs, you can blame, the push up front, whatever it may be. But against a team like Vanderbilt, you're going to get some solid push from the offensive line, this offensive line is still one of the better units in the country, despite what people want to say after Saturday. So I think it's taking advantage of your touches and, really helping Quinn out. Because if you can get a run game going, we know how much play action Sark likes to use. That's where the deep shots open up over the top. It seems like Jaden Blue, despite not getting any carries last week, still a lot of positivity coming into this week. And so for Blue and Wisner, and I guess even Gibson a little bit too, if he's able to get in, are you picking up those extra tough yards? You making the right cut. Not everything has to go for a 50-yard touchdown. Texas really needs those 3 to 4 yard runs. Like, those are crucial. You were not getting those against Georgia. You were in a lot of 2nd and 11s, and we need those to be 2nd and 7, 2nd and 6. To kind of keep the script of the offense. And when you're on script in this offense, that's where Sark really does his damage. So, for me, offensive side of the ball, looking at the running backs, and then defensive side, I'm looking towards the edge play.
Yeah, edge play, I specifically had mentioned in an article I did yesterday about how important that's going to be for this game. It goes without saying. I do think for Texas, having some of those lengthy edge rushers and Ethan Burke, a stronger guy like Barron Sorrell, some of these experienced guys that are good defending the run is definitely going to help you. Trey Moore's speed. I think did you mention Trey Moore? I thought I heard you bring him up at one point, but
No, I didn't, but that's a good call.
He was really good containing the option. The quarterback option run against OU. I mean, I know that OU's offense was pretty lackluster as a whole, but when it seemed like they were moving the ball okay early, Trey Moore had made a couple of nice defensive stops against the option, and that definitely stuck out to me. But yeah, I mean, you're right. Texas, one thing that just jumped off the page at me, Texas just they've got to be better than they've been in, I think, multiple SEC games this season. Just running the football, against Mississippi State and Georgia, Texas was hit at the line of scrimmage over 45% of runs. Those have been the only two games this season when you exclude like quarterback sacks or anything like that. Again, that 45 to 50%, it doesn't include those 7 sacks or whatever it is on Quinn Ewers. Obviously, you would like to remove that from looking at these numbers, but and Texas just wasn't really able. I mean, and you mentioned it, Texas just wasn't making anyone miss against Georgia. I know that's common. They've got some really athletic guys, but Texas only made a Georgia defender miss on like a little over 10% of carries. Texas has been much better than that. They've been about, a quarter, or maybe about a quarter rate of avoided tackles per carry this season. Which is solid, but Texas doesn't. Trey Wisner's a solid back. Jaden Blue can make guys miss out in space, but you don't have the guys this season like a Jonathan Brooks that is that one cut, make 2 guys miss, and then power through 3 other tacklers. Jaden Blue is kind of that hit the hole and burst and turn on that speed, but he's mostly a guy that's going to make people miss out like that swing pass game, getting the ball out in space and juking some guys out in the open field. Wisner, I think, is getting there, but he's still pretty early. And Gibson, I think Gibson's almost the opposite, where he'll run through some guys, but he's not the shiftiest. So Baxter is probably the guy for you that would have been making, be able to hit the hole, maybe make a guy miss on a cut and then, power through 2 more tacklers. But, obviously you don't have him for the season. So, yeah, no, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with the running backs and the edge rushers there. I've said Quinn already. If I could add one more, I think it's going to be Jelani McDonald. I think there's going to be a lot on him this weekend to be able to, hold up at safety. Texas is going to be relying again very heavily on. I mean, they've been relying heavily on Michael Taff all season, but since McDonald came back from injury, 4 or 5 weeks ago, something like that, he's been good, but he's going to have to be good down the stretch. All right, score predictions. This has been a tough one for me. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you take it.
Okay. The number that's been sticking out to me is 38-24.
Okay.
I could see a little bit of I think that this game is going to be higher scoring because I think that both teams have been good once they get into the red zone. They've been really good once they get into the red zone. I don't think that Vanderbilt's defense has the same level of quality that OU and Georgia did, to the point where, like, at least early, that they will hold Texas. I think Texas, what they have to do is just execute, avoid mistakes, untimely errors. But if you don't beat yourself in this game, I think Texas should be in a pretty good spot, depending on how the defense holds up. But I have faith in the defense to do their thing and at least keep Vanderbilt from putting up a 30 spot on you, like they almost did to Mizzou and like they did to Alabama.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's fair. I think I'm going 41-20 Texas. I think that, I've talked about it being, born in 99, really started paying attention to Texas during the Colt years. Obviously was around during the VY run, but don't have that many memories of it. And so, but I mean, really since then, my fandom for most of my life, I've been that Scorn Texas fan from in the 2010s. So I always in the back of my mind have, are we going to get a same old Texas, same old Texas? And if they don't come out and play well today on Saturday against Vanderbilt, that same old Texas starts to creep back into your head. But something I said at the beginning of the show, like this team is ranked fifth in the country. And, before last season, it was a long time but since Texas had been ranked that high. So I don't think one loss is going to perturb this team, especially given all the veteran leadership you have. I think Vandy's defense can be had. I think where you could get into trouble in this game is game script. We hit on that early and often. If you don't come out firing early and you let Vanderbilt control the clock, that's where this one gets dicey. But I think Sark is going to be able to put Quinn and the running game into advantageous positions early on. I think Texas probably gets a solid lead early. And I don't think it'll ever be comfortable because I think if Vanderbilt does go down, they're going to have some tricks up their sleeve, looking to get the ball over the top with some trick plays and things like that. But ultimately, I think Texas really comes out with, I guess you can call it a statement win. Looking at the beginning of the season, you wouldn't say a win against Vanderbilt is a statement win, but there are going to be some eyes on this game. A lot of people rooting for Texas to lose, whether you're anti-Texas or just pro seeing this Vanderbilt run. But I think Texas is gonna answer the call and play pretty well. And just a way too specific prediction, I could see Jeff Banks' unit getting really aggressive. I could see a blocked punt, just looking to spark the team with some energy. I think that they're probably going to let Golden return more kickoffs into the end zone. Obviously, we know Silas Bolden has been incredibly aggressive fielding the punts. So I think you could see a big play from either the return game or the defensive punt unit blocking a punt.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, if special teams, obviously getting Michael Kern hopefully back, will I think Ratcliffe did okay. I think it we haven't had any blocked punts. His net was still, I think, over 40 yards. I think I would have to look back at the stats the data from the Georgia game, but anyway, yeah, no, special teams will be big here too. That was obviously still a big component to the Georgia game, was their ability to flip that field position. Their punting game was really good.
Yeah.
And that was one of the parts, because I know their net yards per punt was at least 10 yards more than ours, which played a big role in that game.
Yep.
Yeah, I was looking back at it. You actually had the closest score prediction last week because you had Texas winning by the narrowest margin of everyone.
Okay.
I had them winning by 4 points. You had them winning by 3. So by virtue, you got the closest. But I don't really chalk that up to anyone, because I usually say you have to get the right result or at least pretty close. But no one was even within more than net of 18 points. So
yeah, that was rough.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised that no one picked Georgia. I guess we're all.
Yeah, I think we're all not
hopped up on hope on that one.
Yeah, not drinking the Kool-Aid, but I just had some superior belief in this team, and I like I said, we talked about at the beginning. Your season goals are still on the table, and I think it could be the best thing that happens at Texas, because there's a good chance they'll play Georgia again at some point this season. It's hard to beat a team twice. I think they'll be more prepared rather than I don't think this team reads their own press clippings, but if they would have won that game, you would have been cruising the rest of the way. So I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. However, if you do lose this Saturday, then you have no margin for error the rest of the season. So that's where the Georgia loss could be pretty ugly. But
I did want to mention something in regards to the kind of Texas's path at this point. So I was looking at it. Georgia still has a road game against Ole Miss, still has Tennessee at home. I'm kind of confused about the Tennessee game at this point, because I still am not sure of who both those teams are at this point of the season. Like, I think Tennessee, they're relying on a young quarterback who got a little banged up against Alabama, and they're very reliant on a ground game that if Dylan Sampson is off the field or injured, then it's just not there. Yeah. Tennessee's defensive front's been good. Their defense as a whole has been really good, but their offense, it's not what you would expect from having all the hype behind Nico and Sampson and all their weapons in the receiving core. But Ole Miss also has been underwhelming, obviously, this season. Texas, you still got the A&M game that I think at this point, would we be in agreement here that A&M's probably the most difficult remaining game for the
100%.
path. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially in College Station.
Yeah. And so, I'll be interested to see how A&M does. Isn't A&M LSU's this weekend? Yeah. So
that's a big one because they're the only two undefeated teams in the SEC.
Yeah.
So,
that's the last thing I wanted to do. Who do you think's winning that one?
I'm going LSU just because I'm trying to remove the bias, but whether it's Reed or Wegman, I think LSU has a huge gap in quarterback play with Garrett Nussmeier. I'm a huge Nuss guy, and I think they'll be able to stretch the field. Hopefully, they can hold up on the offensive line and give time, for Nuss to find Lacey down the field. Kyle Field will be rocking. I mean, this is their number one rival, right? So they got to get up for this one, but.
The weirdest rivalry in the SEC, man. It's
yeah, but I think it'll be a back and forth game. It's probably going to come down to whatever quarterback protects the ball better, which I think we're going to see a fair share of turnovers. It's going to be a weird game, is my prediction. I think a lot of momentum shifts, a lot of turnovers. But funny enough, both teams lost week 1 and have reeled off 6 in a row. So good for them and their fan bases.
Yeah, I mean. And looking at it too, LSU, man, their defense has been pretty solid since the second half against UCLA. I mean, it's been hard to tell how good or bad their defense is this season. Since they lost Harold Perkins, it seems like they've actually figured out their identity, kind of.
Yeah, the numbers show that since they lost Perkins, and not saying Perkins is a bad player, I love watching Harold Perkins, but they've been better.
Misuse them.
Yes, exactly. They've been better without Perkins, so that'll be. It's gonna be a fun game. Hopefully, we watch that game after a Texas win and just kind of stress free. It doesn't really matter who ends up pulling it out, but it'll be fun regardless.
Yeah, and LSU's got A&M on the road this weekend, Alabama at home, and then Florida on the road, then Vanderbilt before capping the season against against OU. So I have LSU might win this game this weekend, but I have a hard time seeing them going undefeated in the SEC.
No chance. I don't think there's no chance, but I don't think any team's finishing undefeated. If Texas wins out, they knock on wood, if they win out, they're 100%, not 100%, but they will very likely be in the SEC championship game if they win out. I think where you get some issues is there might be 3, 4, maybe even 5 teams that finish 6-2, and then it comes down to some weird tiebreakers. But who knows?
Yeah, no, I've been looking at the SEC standings, and I mean, Georgia-Texas rematch in the title game is certainly a possibility. I could still see LSU making it there. I mean, at this point, I think it's either Texas or Texas A&M. I just don't think that both will end up making it.
Yeah.
Granted, A&M's got a pretty favorable schedule.
They do. That's why if even obviously you're a Texas fan, you root against A&M. I think any fans of SEC teams towards the top, you're rooting against A&M Saturday because LSU's path after is much harder than A&M's path after. So
that said, though, A&M next weekend goes on the road against South Carolina, and that could be a dangerous game for them coming off the LSU game.
Yeah,
South Carolina has not been easy for anyone to beat, especially OU.
Definitely, yeah, no kidding.
So, I guess except for Ole Miss kind of, but Ole Miss is a weird team anyway. Yeah, so the second half of the season is going to be fun. The SEC and the Big Ten right now still showing that, maybe barring Clemson and Miami really running things in the second half of the season, maybe Pitt, they look good.
Yeah, they sure do.
Weird enough, I looked like that Pitt team from a few years ago under with Kenny Pickett. It's anyway, so I'm excited to see what happens. But anyway, for Andrew Miller, Shane Black, WelcomeHeadlines.com, Welcome Horn Show. That's pretty much it. Welcome.